A very good evening to all of you. Have you ever looked up at the moon on a clear night and wondered about the incredible journey that took humans there? Today, we have a unique opportunity to delve into the most curious question of our time. Did we really go to the moon? It is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for this special talk, Professor Deepal Subasinghe, Associate Research Professor at the Earth Resources and Renewable Energy Research Project, NIFS. He completed his BSc and MPhil at the University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka, and earned his PhD from the University of Reading, England in 1999. Later, he conducted his postdoctoral research at RMIT University, Australia from 2003 to 2009. Professor Deepal has held multiple positions such as past president of the Geological Society of Sri Lanka and has been a member of the Board of Earth Sciences at the Postgraduate Institute of Science, University of Peradeniya. He is a life member of both Geological Society of Sri Lanka and the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Deepal Subasinghe to be enlightening us on the captivating topic. Dear sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you for the generous introduction. Good afternoon and good evening to those who are joining from Australia, and good morning to those who are from the western part of the world. Okay, I know that this is quite a controversial topic I'm going to talk about. Before that, I want to tell you why I developed the interest in this, and so it is sort of a personal experience. So please bear with me because I want to mention some of my personal experiences and some of the steps I have gone through. So as mentioned during the introduction, I went to Australia. Actually, I went to to accept the position at university position in Australia. Before that, I was working as a senior lecturer in physics, but I couldn't get no pay leave, so I had to leave. Then I decided to leave there until I returned to Sri Lanka in 2009. When I joined this university, RMIT University. I met a young postdoctoral fellow who just finished his PhD, a budding scientist like some of you. He's from Middle East. So he also joined at the same time with me. Our research group was a multidisciplinary research group led by a chemist, and this person I'm mentioning, he has done polymer science. And I was working on minerals, and I was given this to take care of the extra facilities like XRD and so on. And they had these very good X-ray facilities such as high temperature XRD, small angle XRD, and GATS, that's the general area diffraction and so on. So I had to undergo some radiation safety and guidelines as well. So that also allowed me to learn about the radiation and other things. So this person I'm talking about, he was crazy about joining NASA. You know, most of the youngsters who has done physics or physical sciences, it is their dream to join NASA because they think NASA is the best place for scientists to work. So this person was also crazy about joining NASA, and he was checking any openings, any opportunities to join NASA. One day he came to me very excited, telling, you know, NASA is going to moon in 15 years' time, going back to moon. and they are making preparations. So they are recruiting scientists to make the preparations. Is it? I think I have an opportunity because they need to prepare a spacesuit for the astronauts. So yeah, I was also very happy for him, and we started looking for the requirements. Okay, this spacesuit should withstand extreme temperatures and temperature changes, because on the moon there's no atmosphere to regulate temperature. So when the sun is hitting an object, that object gets heated up very to high temperature, but in the shadows it is very cold. And also there's very strong radiation on the sun, because sun flares, solar winds, they hit moon, and they have these very high energy particles, like millions of electron volts, high energy particles, electrons and protons, and also they generate X-rays when they hit objects, and also cosmic rays and many other radiations, in addition to the solar radiation. Luckily in the Earth, we have this magnetic field, so the magnetic field will deviate or deflect, or they will send these charged particles around the Earth without letting them get into the surface. But on the moon, there's no such magnetic field. So the suit should protect the astronaut from radiation. Also, it should be flexible, and also it should withstand the micrometeorite. These micrometeorites are very tiny particles, sometimes sub-millimeter-sized particles, but they are traveling at a very high speed because there's no atmosphere to slow them down or burn them on the moon. So under the gravity, and they are traveling, and they don't slow down like here in our atmosphere. Most of the objects, they achieve this terminal velocity, and most of the meteorite get burnt, but it doesn't happen on the moon. So I propose that we will produce a self-healing skin. Like we make a skin with polymer, because he's a polymer scientist. So we fill the second layer with tiny bubbles filled with some liquid resin or liquid polymer. So when there's a small tiny meteorite or some small damage hits, I'm talking about the sub-millimeter-sized damages. These tiny bubbles will leak out, and immediately they will solidify and repair the damage. So he was very happy to hear that idea, and we started developing. And I thought, okay, that previously in 1969, that was 35 years before, at that time, 35 years ago, scientists have developed other capabilities, so we don't have to do that. We just have to do the literature survey to find out what they have done. Because when we write a proposal or research paper, the first thing what we do is finding what they have already discovered. Do you know what we found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because if they have gone to moon in 1969, that was 35 years before, 2003, 2004 time, they must have had the literature, they must have had the patents. Our university had access to all the patent databases and literature, but searching through that, we found nothing. That is when we started to be skeptic and try to find out what's going on. And also in Australia, you have access to many channels, ABC, BBC, and all these news channels, Al Jazeera, whatever you want. And we were following some news about the space agency, NASA, and some incidents. Okay, so to understand some complex issue, we need to look at the issue in a wider perspective. So we need to consider, like, in a point like this, we have to consider the geopolitical landscape, technical capabilities, and political moves possible political motives behind these things, and also evident from independent sources. Okay, in 1960s, the world, okay, so the senior people know what I'm talking about. World War II finished in 1945, and then there are two regimes dominating the world, communist and the capitalist. The communists were led by Soviet Union at the time, it was USSR, and the other part was led by the United States. So they had this Cold War. So this cartoon actually depicts what is the Cold War. They both try to show that they are the supreme, and they want to avoid any confrontation, direct confrontation, by showing that we are superior, so the other person would not attack. And so also they have to keep developing their capabilities, or at least it's more of a propaganda war rather than a direct conflict. But still, to maintain a propaganda war, they have to keep developing things. And also, whenever there's a war in another country, they go and support one party and show their dominance. And yes, the Cold War between basically USA and USSR. We call Russia for USSR now, so easy to mention it easier. But USSR meaning Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And now USA had to engage with this Cold War with USSR, and also they were engaged in a real war, which is Vietnam War. I think some of you might have heard that. Vietnam War, there are many movies and many things. And also because of this war, there are domestic unrest, domestic problems and rallies and so on. And also there's international pressure because of the deaths and the killings and all these human rights violations and all these things. And in the same time, they had to undergo these presidential elections, and their president got assassinated, and some presidents got caught in some scandals and so on. I'll come to them later. Okay, this Vietnam War, it was between the North Vietnam and South Vietnam. North Vietnam was communist. It's backed by communists. And South Vietnam was backed by Americans, and actually they really directly involved in the war. And at some points of the period, there were more than 500,000 American soldiers occupying Vietnam. And about 60,000 American soldiers died, and over 600,000 injured. Injured means not cuts and bruises, the war injuries. And more than 4 million Vietnamese died. And so within the USA, there was a great protest against this war, because they were asking, what is this war for? In recent years, last few decades, the wars were fought by USA for some purpose, like to get the gas or oil resources or dominate something. But here it is simply for the domination. They want to show their supremacy. So people are asking, questioning, why, as it says, why my son was killed in Vietnam, what for? Vietnam doesn't have oil or gas, and it's a useless war. We gain nothing. And as in any country, it is the university students who are leading these protests. Okay, let's go to the space area. Now the space race began when the Russia or USSR sent their first satellite to the orbit. And also they sent first animal and then the first man to the space. At that time, actually, the NASA was not even established, so they quickly established NASA in 1958.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay.
Okay, so this is the famous speech by John F. Kennedy. So he clearly said that we have to be in the space race if you want to be the world leaders. So, okay, this is the diagram showing, but I'll show the enlarged. Okay, on the left side, it is the USSR or the Russia. The other side is America. So, in 1957, they sent the first artificial satellite and the first animal to the space. And then next year, America also followed them by sending an artificial satellite. And then they established NASA. And in 1958 July. And then in 1950, the USSR or Russia, they selected their cosmonauts and then they sent Yuri Gagarin, you must have heard his name, Yuri Gagarin in orbit. Next year, Americans also sent a man to orbit, but he could only spend about 15 minutes in this orbit and he would complete one full survey. Then Russia sent the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova, and then they also went ahead with the moon programs. And they achieved the first multi-person spacecraft, Russia, in October 1964 with 3 astronauts in it. And they also achieved the first spacewalk. So America also responded by sending 2 people to space so that they can train multi-person spacecraft, and they achieved the spacewalk, and they also achieved the first orbital rendezvous. And Russia sent the probe and to the moon, and it soft landed in 1966. And then America did the first docking in space, and they wanted to do everything very quickly. So they started the Apollo program, but there was an accident, and 3 astronauts died. And that delayed the program, Apollo program for 1.5 years. In the meantime, Russia also had their share of thing, but they only had accident and 1 astronaut died. This is where Russia was after America, only in accident. In everything else, Russia was leading at the time. And also they did the first spacecraft to fly around the moon and return to the Earth. And then the American did the first flight of Apollo, and then they suddenly landed the first humans on the moon. Okay, so it was very complex thing now, going to moon, but suddenly they claimed that they landed and that ended the space race.
The space age. Competition for victor was unparalleled. Powerful nations spent billions in unabashed rivalry to outdo the other. The Soviet Union launched the first orbiting satellite, the first animal, the first man. They had logged 500% more hours in space than the United States. And in June of 1969, they launched an unmanned probe to the moon to retrieve the first soil sample from another world, just 1 month before Apollo 11.
Okay, now a little bit about American history. So John F. Kennedy was the president from 1961 to 63, and he was a politician, not a scientist. So in his famous speech, which I will show later, and I showed a little bit of that, and he said that they should join the space race to show their dominance. And also he sets the goal of going to moon before the end of the decade. It was not scientifically or technically learned decision. It is just a political decision. Of course, scientists knew it is not possible, and it laid huge pressure on the scientists and NASA. And 2 years later, he was assassinated in a mysterious way, and still people don't know who was behind that and the motives or reasons behind that.
The exploration of space will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And it is one of the great adventures of all time. And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind. We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Okay, now it's interesting now. John F. Kennedy was the 35th president. Now, after that, Johnson was there, and then after that, Richard Nixon, a Jewish person, he became the president. And during his time, Vietnam was escalating, and there were huge protests, as I said. And so America always wanted to maintain their supremacy, right? To show that they are the leaders and they are the most powerful. To do that, you have to maintain the war and the Cold War, both. To do that, you need a huge military budget. But people are opposing, people are protesting. You don't want to spend more money, taxpayers' money, on the useless war. It's just killing our sons, brothers, fathers, and so on, husbands, and why? So it was almost impossible to get their budget approved. Not almost, it's totally impossible. But without a military budget, it is not possible to sustain the Vietnam War as well as the propaganda war. So if you lose war, you lose the power, especially in USA. So it was essential to get a large budget one way or the other. Okay, so then government made people believe that if USSR dominates the space, they could then launch military attack from the space. And also they said, okay, we are going to send a man to moon. So people, okay, they all forgot about those military things, and they happily approved their budget. But what is unknown is 95% of missile technology and rocket technology to send man to moon is the same. Okay, so it's quite interesting now. Nixon involved in this Watergate scandal. I don't know, maybe young people don't know this. It's a sort of a scandal to remain in power, and they did some, they broke into this building called Watergate, and there they found that it was done with the consent of the president, and they got impeachment. Before that, President Nixon resigned. He's the only person to resign from office after the result of the scandal. Okay, and also it's quite interesting to see that all those so-called moon landings happened only during Nixon's administration. And we know what is his credibility because of this. Okay, so let's do a little bit of technical thing. Okay, so this is a picture showing the relative distance of moon and the earth, like 400,000, nearly 400,000, 384,400 kilometers. And now, all the all the space missions so far have only done low Earth orbit, which is less than 1,000 kilometers. Around our Earth, there are radiation belts actually, called Van Allen radiation belts. I will show a small movie clip.
Unbeknownst to the citizenry, high above the Earth, beginning at an altitude of 1,000 miles and extending an additional 25,000 miles, lay lethal bands of radiation called the Van Allen radiation belts. Every space mission in history with humans on board, from both the United States and Soviet Union, from the first in 1961 to the present, has been well below this deadly radiation field. Mercury, Gemini, Soyuz, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, all maintained altitudes well below 1,000 miles. All except Apollo. The more experienced Soviets spent 100 hours in space for every 20 hours of the US. In order to survive the hour-and-a-half journey through this radiation field necessary to reach the moon and return, solid lead shielding between the astronauts and the exposure outside would be required. The mammoth Saturn V rocket used by Apollo was already 35 stories tall and weighed as much as a battleship. To add additional tonnage in the form of a lead barrier completely surrounding the crew members would have made it impossible for the vehicle to get off the ground. That is why the Soviets, though more advanced, only sent an unmanned probe to the moon. The Apollo spacecraft's narrowest shielding was less than 1/8 of an inch of light aluminum. In 1998, the Space Shuttle flew to an altitude of 350 miles, one of its highest altitudes ever, hundreds of miles below the beginning of a field of radiation that was so severe that the astronauts inside of their shielded spacecraft and inside of their shielded spacesuits saw flashes of light with their eyes shut that they described as shooting stars, due to radiation penetrating first the shuttle's shielding, then their spacesuit shielding, then their skulls, and finally the retinas of their closed eyes. As a result, CNN issued the following report noting NASA's unpredicted surprise. The radiation belt surrounding Earth may be more dangerous for spacewalking astronauts than previously believed. Scientists say the phenomena known as the Van Allen belts can spawn killer electrons when the Earth's magnetic field changes. These electrons that are being studied could have an important effect not only on satellites, which has happened in the past, but could also affect the astronauts by creating large doses of radiation that could influence their health. The electrons can penetrate through various materials, including spacesuits, and can pass through, in fact, the walls of the space station, and can create high charges deep inside of these objects.
Okay, now, these are like the permissible dose of radiation. Now, when you get the radiation, usually if it is a small damage, the body will actually repair it. So normally we say that 5 REM with a REM per year is the safe radiation, at least for the people. But that is spread throughout the year. So if you get that 5 REM in 1 hour, that could be lethal. And same with depending on where you receive them. So when you receive it in a spread out time, then it is quite safe. But if it is in a concentrated time, in a short period, that could be lethal. And they calculated that in the Van Allen belts, it could be more than 150 REM. They should have received in 1.5 hours time they were spending that each day. Okay, so there must be a huge dose of radiation on the astronauts, and like in the case of Marie Curie, she died of cancer as a result of radiation she received while doing the experiment. So we also should see what happened to these people, but apparently, okay, Neil Armstrong died after bypass surgery, and his body was dumped in the sea. I don't know why. Maybe they don't want anybody to do any postmortem on that to see any radiation damage or anything somehow, because he cannot be cremated because he's a Christian. Yeah, let's look at the Buzz Aldrin. He's 94 now. He's alive and kicking, not only kicking, he got married last year at the age of 93. So it doesn't seem to have any effect of radiation or cancer or anything.
Also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're...
Yeah. So in this video, if you listen carefully, she says that this is this female astronaut. She says that it's exciting to know that we are going past the lower Earth orbit. That means they have not done it before. And also in the next part, a scientist says that we have to measure, we have to do some measures to protect the people from radiation.
Also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Because we must solve these challenges before we send the human through this region. Sometimes the words slip out of their mouth.
Also really push...
Okay, and there are a lot of photographic and video evidences which I'm not going to explain in detail, but I will show a small video.
From an analytical standpoint, photographic anomalies have to be sought out with an understanding of lighting and shadows. The most straightforward is simple. When objects are lit solely by the sun, as all the scenes on the moon were said to be, after all, lighting equipment was not only impractical, it was unnecessary in bright sunlight, then all shadows, regardless of the landscape, will run parallel with one another and never intersect, as shown by this example. In these seldom seen photographs, obtained from a rarely used auxiliary NASA archival site, it is clear that these scenes were lit with artificial light. These shadows, which are cast at different angles, are evidence that a second light source is being used. In addition, the sun would not cause an isolated hotspot like this, only an artificial light would. Again, intersecting shadows and another hotspot. And again. And again. It is simply impossible for this picture to have been taken with sunlight on the moon. Here, the shadows are shown to be as black as pitch. And yet here, completely in a shadow, the astronaut is lit up like a Christmas tree. How can this be? Or this, on the shadow side of the lunar module. In this magnification of an Apollo photograph, a rock, very likely a papier-mâché prop because of the crease here, is categorized with the letter C. In later releases of the same picture, the letter is gone, probably airbrushed out. Here a crosshair, which was burned directly into the image from the film plate and thus should always appear on top of the objects in the photograph, appears behind the object in this scene, clearly revealing a composite of two pictures into one. Someone apparently forgot to create a burn crater underneath the lunar module's 10,000-pound thrust engine, despite the fact that during ground tests there was a real concern for the vehicle falling into the hole the engine created as it descended. Here is a Norman Rockwell depiction drawn just 2 years earlier based on the latest specifications and scientific data. In these enlargements, it looks as though the lunar module was simply placed there, not even one speck of moon dust on the landing pod. As a result, all subsequent flights had to have the same discrepancy, which was explained away by the effect of no atmosphere. And what about stars? On the moon, with no atmosphere, they must have been quite a sight to behold. Yet there is seldom any mention of them, if ever, by any of the astronauts on any of the missions. Undoubtedly, creating a mural with all the constellations properly placed in the sky would have been virtually impossible to create accurately, much less realistically. A competent amateur astronomer would have been able to call attention to the slightest error in measurement. The answer? Not to talk about the stars. Ever. In their post-flight press conference, it was the only question to which Neil Armstrong responded with an absence of memory.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Years later, though, Michael Collins would remember seeing the elusive stars and wrote about them in Expeditions to the Moon. It seems his memory improved the older he got. Why don't stars appear in any of the photographs? Simply because the proper, mostly closed exposure setting for the camera's iris, set that way to compensate for the bright sunlight on the moon's surface, completely diminished the faintness of relatively distant specks of diminutive light. This answer is true. It does not, however, explain why they never took any pictures of the stars by themselves, with an exposure setting perfect for them. While they took 3 automobiles to the moon, they never took a photographic telescope. Had they done so, they would have been able to see farther into the universe than had ever before been realized. If they had taken a telescope and were not actually on the moon, they would have had to concoct undiscovered galaxies that might one day prove to be non-existent. The cost of the 3 moon rovers in 21st century currency? Nearly $60 million each, though they had fewer parts than a Jeep. Where was all this money going? Then there's the flag, blowing in the wind, at least twice, on the atmosphereless moon. We can only guess that most of the missions were staged inside for fear of possible aerial or satellite reconnaissance from an unfriendly nation. The backpacks, designed for 1/6 gravity, must have had the cooling systems removed to allow for movement without falling over. With very near and hot studio lighting, that left one hot astronaut inside. Assuming that it was the astronauts inside after all, their faces were always covered. The necessary mammoth amounts of air conditioning were probably responsible for the air current. Here the editor cuts to a still shot of the flag, just as the effect becomes noticeable. Here it is unchecked. This rare clip, attained decades ago, was never re-released with the inevitable increase in experience and scrutiny. To demonstrate 1/6 gravity, a bouncy, floaty feel to the astronauts' movements would be similarly achieved with relative simplicity. Slow motion. You are viewing the scenes as they aired more than 30 years ago. Now let's look at them with the speed doubled. It becomes discernible that they are, in fact, in Earth's gravity, and are no more leaving the ground than they would on Earth.
Okay, so this documentary was formed like 25 years ago, that's right. They say 30 years ago. Okay, there are some other things we feel little suspicious. Okay, one thing is that the NASA's highest ranking officer resigned just few days before the biggest achievement of the mankind. And also, the NASA built landscapes similar to the surface of the moon at areas accessible only for them. They also had moon sets and life-size models of their modules. Even if you go to NASA museum, they only have replicas displayed. They also sent a satellite to orbit to simulate the signals coming from the moon. When asked, NASA said, okay, that is to rehearse the things. And it's impossible to know whether that satellite, actually, that is satellite sent that signals to the Earth. So we don't know whether it is recorded data or whether they receive actual data from moon. And another question people ask is how they kept this large project hidden from the people in a secret, how they maintain the secrecy. But if you know what is Manhattan Project, that is the project to build the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb, that had hundreds of thousands of people, more than 25% more people involved, yet the secret did not get out because each one was doing a small part of the project. So they don't know what the whole project is, the whole picture. Only few people know the whole picture. And also, these all three astronauts resigned from NASA. And Neil Armstrong, he never gave any interview except for the first interview. And I remember while in Australia, I saw a small video on TV. A media person, journalist, was going after Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong is a strong Catholic. And so this journalist carrying a Bible, and he was going after Neil Armstrong, was asking him, Neil Armstrong, can you swear to God that you walked on the moon, keeping your hand on the Bible, and I will give he was holding $25,000 to you, or if you don't want, you can nominate any church you want, I will give that money. So Neil Armstrong was very disturbed and very upset, and he didn't know what to do, and he was running away from him. And also, quite interestingly, he never gave any interview or any talk. So he completely withdrew from the society and was living in seclusion. And also, he refused to participate in the 40th anniversary of his moon landing. He's the one who walked on the moon. People are celebrating, but he was not joining it. And there are many things happen. There's no time to mention all these things. And only once, while he was at White House, some students came and he was asked to speak a few words. And this is what he says.
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona what stars we could see.
I don't remember seeing any.
Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone.
He says, we only completed the beginning and you are supposed to finish what is undone. And also, I cut that video. He said that you need to remove the truth protecting layers to know the truth, he says. And that's what it is. And also, we had to find out the computer power. And my watch has 1,000 times more computer power than the lunar module had. It only had 2,000 word, 2048 word memory. And also, okay, I'll talk for a second one later. And also the footprints on the dust. Now, you know that when the lunar land, the lunar module is lowering, it has to control the speed. To do that, they blow the rockets downwards. And those rocket engines are very powerful, so they blow away all the dust. But you see that the footprints of the astronauts are very well preserved, and it looks like they are in wet soil. If it is not wet soil, it has to be extremely fine dust particles. If you walk on tough sand, you don't leave that much of a very clear footprints. But when he landed and he got out of the lunar module, his footprint was in the dust, so that means dust is still there under the lunar module. That is quite impossible. And also, when they are landing and also when they are leaving, they are sitting on a very noisy rocket engine. Rocket engines have very loud noise. Even when a rocket is launched, people are supposed to watch it from more than 1 kilometer, because that is like 120 decibel limit. So the rocket, so they are sitting virtually on the rocket engine, just a few inches below them. But their voices are very clear. You don't hear any rocket engine voice. Now, inside the module, there's air and the metals are there, so sound is coming to the microphone. But you hear it's very clear. And also, I saw a video. Someone wanted to measure the dimensions of inside this lunar module. And first he tried to get the diagrams. NASA said, we destroyed all the diagrams, so we don't have it. So he went there and measured. And then he said that it's too small for two people to enter and exit, because the instrument panels and entrances are very next to each other, and one person is sitting right next to the door. So they said, it seems it's not possible. And also, now Moon is like 400,000 kilometers away, and so there's always like 1.3 delay, 1 second delay when we send the signal for the light to go to the Moon. So when we are communicating, we say something and the other person replies. It can take like 3 seconds, 2.6 seconds minimum. And also, so that means you cannot actually control this lunar module from the Earth, because when the signal goes there, it has already hit something or something, so it has to be, it cannot be controlled from the Earth. And also, they don't have this autonomous landing, autonomous parking, which is available nowadays in computers. And also, now we have to realize that the Moon has gravity. It is 1/6 gravity. It is not 0 gravity. To leave the Earth's gravity, we use a huge rocket, Saturn V rocket. And to leave the Moon, this is what they used. Now, this is lunar module, and when it landed, these two parts are together. And they used these fuel in these tanks to control the fall. So just see the size of the tanks, and they need that much of fuel to control the fall, which is falling under gravity, and just control the speed. Now, when they were leaving, they had to leave the gravity of the Moon, and they only had a tiny little cylinder of fuel to leave the Moon's gravity and join the satellite orbiting Moon. That also looks very unconvincing. So this is for the scale. This is the rocket they used to leave the Earth's gravity. That is more than 100 meters high, and almost 90 meters is full.
We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
Our research suggests that images of the Apollo landings are not a true and accurate record. In our view, the Apollo pictures were faked. Many of the images are replete with inconsistencies and anomalies.
Okay, that's what experts say. Not just my view. Yeah, so I have some questions. I mean, when last year, I remember the Indians celebrated landing on the moon, just 3 kilograms of material. Just not people, but some satellite, some rover, some instrument. And also, why there are no attempts to go to moon after Nixon's era? And when Edmund Hillary and Tenzin climbed the Everest for the first time, okay, they wanted to be the first, but it didn't stop other people climbing. On the Everest, there's no scientific experiments going on, but moon, if you go, there are a lot of things you can do. You can collect a lot of knowledge, you can do experiments. But if there's a possibility, why no other countries, no other people, even US, they didn't go after that. And now I want to show you, these are the failures from astronaut fatalities. Russia had lost 6 astronauts, and America lost 25 astronauts. And these are some non-fatal incidents. The blue is America and red is Russia, or USSR, or Russia. Yeah. So even last month, at the bottom, last month there was a rocket failure. I think those who follow international news might have seen this. That means after nearly 60 years, we still have these failures. But apparently, all these Apollo missions, they were succeeded without any accident or failure. And the Apollo mission is 1,000 times more complex and difficult. But how come they achieved all these things 55 years ago? But now they can't even send a satellite to the orbit.
Go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
So that's what NASA says. NASA has answers to everything. So they say, we had, but now we destroyed and we can't recreate that technology.
NASA and the government faked the moon landing was basically, it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio.
Can you realize that that you and I, that all of us, have actually begun the exploration of another world?
The United States Geological Survey decided to build a model of one part of the lunar surface in an area accessible to present research centers.
4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Okay, so sometimes they make mistakes. And thank you, and of course, this can go on for several days if I want. There are so many things to say, but I want to stop now because of the time limitation. And I think open for discussion.
What Russia says about moon mission?
Yes. Now, what Russia says, we have to